Good evening. This 84th meeting of the 72nd term of the Baltimore City Council is now called to order. Members of the council, due to us being a virtual meeting, please note that I will recognize you by saying you have the floor. Once I recognize you, please state your name and then begin talking. For tonight's invocation, we will have a moment of silence followed by the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic which stands one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, everybody. Tonight's Showcase Baltimore presenter will be the Italian Cultural Center of Maryland.
Hi, good evening, Council President Scott.
Good evening, ma'am. The floor is all yours.
Thank you, Council President Scott. Thank you, City Council member. The Italian Cultural Center is a nonprofit organization that has been active since 1955. What we're doing right now, we are very active with our community program that is called Be a Chef for Day. Be a Chef for Day usually is a community educational program that teach culinary education, especially teach children how to cook on a budget of $25 for a family of 5. Kids learn how to shop, how to be more financially mindful in their shopping and in buying more nutritious food. We have started in March our community kitchen that was meant to open in November 2020. We decided to open early so we can serve better our community. At the core of our program, there is a dignity of a warm meal. Everybody should have the right to a nutritious cooked meal daily. And so far, we have been able to serve, today actually, we serve 540 meals. We deliver citywide. We have 13 routes, delivery routes every day. We also provide 200 bags of grab and go. 100 are provided by the City of Baltimore through the Family League. 100 we make daily. So on a total, in a day like this, we had out 740 meals. We also provided 260 bags of groceries weekly. We have a pool of 80 volunteers. Every meal is made from scratch daily. We use a commercial kitchen at the incubator Beamer Kitchen on the Yorkwood Quarter. It has been difficult and challenging, but we were able to adapt and serve our community at the best. We serve citywide, and so it has been a challenge at the beginning. You can see in the slide, those are all our routes, so that's where we go. Mostly it's North Baltimore. We were able to work together with many other organizations, not only in North Baltimore and Northern Baltimore, but citywide, and had the support of sponsors that have been with the program since the beginning, since its inception in 2015. We still run our educational program online every Saturday. All the kids from Government Elementary, Walter P. Carter, Lily May, and Guilford Elementary are having their Zoom classroom, and so they connect with me daily, even though we cannot have a physical class anymore. We've been lucky with the support of many organizations and many sponsors that have stepped up and helped us to make quality food available daily for the citizens of Baltimore. We have the same need that basically every other organization that runs a food insecurity program has. There is a scarcity of food. We try to address it on a daily basis, and we try to be as malleable and flexible as we can, but it's always a challenge. Funding is always, it's basically my job. So that's what I'm looking for every day, to make sure that not only we are able to deliver the meals daily, but we will be able to continue to do this job for many, many months, because that's what we analyzing the data that we have. That tells us that almost half of the meals that we currently serve are going to be needed for a way long time. So we are working to make sure we are having a marketing campaign that is starting on May 21st to make sure that we have a constant support. I've been lucky with the support of many of the council members that are sitting, that are in this conversation right now. I'm very thankful for Council Bill Henry, Mary Pat Clark. Thank you, because your office has been a great support for us. If I can be of any help, I can be reached at my email or the phone number for the foundation. It's 410-547-9934. The last slide that you have is our campaign. It's a suspended meal. It's an Italian tradition, comes from my city. I'm from Naples, southern Italy. It's a pay forward. There is this centennial tradition in my city that where you can afford a little bit more, you pay for somebody that cannot afford a meal or a coffee or groceries, and that person can just claim it with no question asked. And that's what we're doing.
Thank you. Thank you so much, and thank you for all your hard work, for all the people that you're serving as we go through this tough time for everyone. So thank you so much, and please keep up the great work.
Thank you so much to you, Council President Scott. Thank you, everyone. Have a good night.
Thank you. Roll call. The clerk will now call the roll of the members. President Scott. Present. Councilman Cohen.
Present.
Councilwoman Mcrae.
Present.
Councilman Dorsey.
Present.
Councilman Dorsey.
Present.
Councilman Henry.
Here.
Councilman Schleifer.
Here.
Vice President Middleton.
Here.
Councilman Pinkett.
Here.
Councilman Burnett.
Present.
Councilman Bullock.
Present.
Councilman Reisinger.
Present.
Councilman Costello.
Present.
Councilman Stokes. Councilman Stokes.
Here.
Councilwoman Key.
Here.
Councilwoman Clark.
Here.
Mr. President, we have a quorum. Thank you. Thank you. Without objection, we will suspend City Council Rule 22B1 in order to hold this meeting on a consecutive Monday. Rule 22B1 is suspended. We will now proceed with the adoption of the journal.
Mr. President, the journal for the May 11, 2020 proceedings have been forwarded to the council members' inboxes.
Without objection, the City Council Journal will be adopted. The journal is adopted. Executive nominations.
EA 20-0269, Kari Davis, Member, Commission on Disabilities.
This has been assigned to the Executive Appointments Committee.
EA 20-0270, Kimberly M. Grade, Member, Commission on Disabilities, District 4.
This has been assigned to the Executive Appointments Committee.
EA 20-0271, David A. Greenberg, Member, Commission on Disabilities, District 5.
This has been assigned to the Executive Appointments Committee.
EA 20-0272, Michael King, Member, Commission on Disabilities, District 2.
This has been assigned to the Executive Appointments Committee.
EA 20-0273, Adam S. Levine, Member, Commission on Disabilities, District 14.
This has been assigned to the Executive Appointments Committee.
EA 20-0274, Yohinde E. Paxton, Member, Commission on Disabilities, District 12.
This has been assigned to the Executive Appointments Committee.
EA 20-0275, Arnold H. Sampson, Member, Ethics Board, District 5.
This has been assigned to the Executive Appointments Committee. Bills to be introduced.
City Council Bill 20-0533, Operating Budget for the Baltimore City Board of School Commissioners for the fiscal year ending June 30, 2021, for the purpose of approving the budget estimated to be needed for the Baltimore City Board of School Commissioners for operating programs during fiscal 2021 providing for certification of the approved budget to the State Superintendent of Schools and providing for a special effective date. Sponsor, City Council President, on behalf of the administration.
This has been assigned to the Budget and Appropriations Committee.
City Council Bill 20-0534, sale of property, 5001 Reisterstown Road, a.k.a. Langston Hughes Elementary School, for the purpose of authorizing the Mayor and City Council of Baltimore to sell at either public or private sale all its interests in certain property known as 5001 Reisterstown Road, a.k.a. Langston Hughes Elementary School, and no longer needed for public use, and providing for a special effective date. Sponsor, City Council President, on behalf of the administration.
Chair recognizes Council Vice President Middleton.
Thank you, Mr. President. I guess I'll start with, as we get through this pandemic, now more than ever, families, students, and communities need support and investment. This virus has magnified the extreme disparities that exist, especially in our most impoverished neighborhoods. Here in District 6 lies Langston Hughes Elementary School, which we fought many years ago to try to keep open, and I still to this day believe that they closed that school too soon. But then, as soon as the school closed, ironically, we got into the situation that happened with Freddie Gray in that era. And during that summer, one of the things that the former mayor had tried to do was to make sure every children still, got fed and had activities just to keep them busy. And lo and behold, Langston Hughes was available. They were closed for a couple years. They were available. They opened it back up and started serving breakfast and lunch there, and also activities. It was just a point where the neighborhood, the organization called Neighborhood United, started banding together and just started volunteering and making sure the students were fed and so on. Anyway, the building, also by doing that, I want to mention that that has been the only school building that closed that was not vandalized. Every city school building that has closed thus far at some point has been vandalized. And that building was protected because of the continued activities that go on there. And it just showed the value and the need of that building. I look at it as an example of what could happen to and what we could be looking at and doing in other neighborhoods that have closed schools. I presently have, I have that Patterson school on Green Spring that we have to keep an eye on because Kip left out of there, but we temporarily now have 150 some men to, practicing the social distancing and making use of some of the area of that building. So I know that all of you have school buildings in your district. We have Northwestern High School that is probably going to eventually go up for sale. But to move on, that area over there we know is part of Park Heights. It's situated in an area and a section that has been extremely neglected for a long period of time, and they have been doing some great and wonderful things. Just to mention a few of the things, we have the ZHAP program at the Zeta Center. That has progressed, and every Thursday they have a senior ZHAP program there. They have free Wi-Fi. They have a certified nurses program there. They have a cyber warrior IT department. It's a testing site for federal and state jobs. They still have that library that's set up, the temporary library that's set up to work with our youth. They have a culinary arts program in there. They have a free Spanish and Mandarin classes. They have a rooftop garden. They have a full-service child care facility. They distribute and deliver personal hygiene products in the community. They have financial literacy classes. They have higher education certification. They have a TV, radio studio, and you do podcasts and documentaries that anyone can go over and sign up to use. They have training for small youth entrepreneurial programs. City agencies continue to use the building to have meetings, to reach out. One that comes to my mind is the Office of Family and Children. They have did programs in there. So, these are just a few of the things that go on in that building for a daily basis. And as I said, it has protected the building from vandalism, which is costly to the city. I think that the hearing is going to be scheduled very soon. I think I'm going to suspend the rules to announce the hearing as well this evening. So as you can hear from me talking about this particular building, I want it to be a model of some of the things that can happen in all of our districts. And just hope I continue to have support and looking forward to the hearing. So thank you.
Thank you. This has been assigned to the Taxation, Finance, and Economic Development Committee.
City Council Bill 20-0535, COVID-19 relief, premium pay for essential workers. For the purpose of requiring certain essential businesses to provide premium pay to their employees, prohibiting certain essential businesses from taking certain adverse actions against their employees, requiring certain essential businesses to keep certain records of their compliance with the premium pay requirements, requiring certain signs to be posted, including the premium pay provisions within the Baltimore City Wage Commission's scope of enforcement, applying certain fines and penalties for violations of premium pay provisions, defining certain terms, providing for a special effective date, and establishing a termination date. Sponsor, City Council President.
Thank you. Thank you all. We all know that during this COVID-19 crisis, we have seen people known as essential workers who we all know were already heroes be lifted up by everyone as they put their lives on the line every day to ensure that Baltimoreans continue to have some sense of normalcy and understanding that this extra risk, both to the health and safety of those workers and their families, should be something that we should be thinking about in compensating. I'm introducing this legislation and want to have a deep and honest discussion about how we can actually honor in a real way these folks that we are calling heroes as they are risking themselves. So I look forward to a hearing in the Labor Committee. Thank you. And this is, please note that Councilman Bullock as a co-sponsor, Councilman Burnett co-sponsor, Councilwoman Middleton as a co-sponsor, Councilwoman Sneed as a co-sponsor, Councilman Pinkett as a co-sponsor, Councilman Cohen as a co-sponsor, Councilman Reisinger as a co-sponsor, Councilman Dorsey as a co-sponsor. This bill has been assigned to the Labor Committee. Resolutions to be introduced.
City Council Resolution 20-0225R, request for state action, veto overrides for Senate Bill 929, Public Safety, Baltimore City Protect, Public Resources Organizing to End Crime Together Program, and Senate Bill 708, Maryland Violence Intervention and Prevention Program Fund and Advisory Council alterations. For the purpose of calling on the Maryland General Assembly to override the governor's veto and pass Senate Bill 929, Public Safety, Baltimore City Protect Program, and Senate Bill 708, Maryland Violence Intervention and Prevention Program Fund and Advisory Council alterations, as passage of these bills would address public safety in Baltimore. Sponsors, Schleifer, President Scott, Clark, Henry.
Please add Councilman Bullock as a co-sponsor, Councilman Pinkett, Councilman Stokes, Councilman Burnett as a co-sponsor, Councilman Dorsey as a co-sponsor, Councilwoman Sneed as a co-sponsor, Councilman Cohen as a co-sponsor, Councilman Reisinger as a co-sponsor. Chair recognizes Councilman Schleifer.
Thank you, Mr. President. We are requesting to override some of these vetoes, as we know, and as you've been fighting for, Mr. President, to regain local control of the police department. We know that we have day-to-day needs that need to be addressed, that we simply have to take that fight to Annapolis to get anything changed as it pertains to public safety, as we see here. And so myself and some of my colleagues have been working around the clock to work with our state partners on getting legislation passed in Annapolis to bring various public safety support to Baltimore City, and then to have it vetoed just like that and off the table, and then waiting in the future to keep working on these things is really unacceptable. And so we're calling on the state to go ahead and introduce an override and try to bring these public safety initiatives to Baltimore. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Councilman. And this is something I think that, as we all know, amid COVID-19, we still had this growing and continuing to grow problem of violent crime. We know that homicides are right on par with very close to last year was the worst year in the history of Baltimore, and understanding that the rhetoric that comes out of the governor's mouth in reference to the state doing all they can to help us doesn't match this action. And we know that our wonderful folks in the General Assembly have been pushing to not only have the state do more law enforcement, but complete and comprehensive actions around violent crime here in Baltimore. We want to support them and let them know that legislative body to legislative body that we are in support of them. Chair recognizes Councilman Schleifer.
I wish to move the resolution.
Without objection, the rules will be suspended. The rules are suspended. Roll call.
President Scott.
Yes.
Councilman Cohen.
Yes.
Councilwoman Mcrae. Councilman Dorsey.
Yes.
Councilman Henry. Councilman Henry.
Yes.
Thank you. Councilman Schleifer.
Yes.
Vice President Middleton.
Yes.
Councilman Pinkett.
Yes.
Councilman Burnett.
Yes.
Councilman Bullock.
Yes.
Councilman Reisinger.
Yes.
Councilman Costello.
Yes.
Councilman Stokes.
Yes.
Councilman Stokes, we're going to record that as a yes.
Yes.
Councilwoman Sneed.
Yes.
Councilwoman Clark.
Yes, definitely.
The motion is approved. This resolution has been adopted.
Council Resolution, 20-0226R, request for state action, override veto of Senate Bill 1065, Economic Development, Baltimore Symphony Orchestra, funding and reporting. For the purpose of calling on the Maryland General Assembly to override the governor's veto and pass Senate Bill 1065, Economic Development, Baltimore City Symphony Orchestra, funding and reporting. As passage of this bill ensures the continued existence and success of the Baltimore Symphony Orchestra. Sponsors, Dorsey, President Scott, Clark, Henry.
Please add Councilman Burnett as a co-sponsor, Councilman Cohen as a co-sponsor, Councilman Pinkett as a co-sponsor, Council Vice President Middleton as a co-sponsor, Chair Councilman Reisinger as a co-sponsor. Chair recognizes, Councilman Stokes as a co-sponsor. I see you, Councilman. Chair recognizes Councilman Dorsey.
Thank you, Mr. President. For those viewing at home who don't have an inbox full of all of the bills that are before the council this evening, I'm just going to read, sorry about that noise from my computer, I'm going to read the first couple of sections of the recitals to this because I think it just summarizes things well. Whereas the Baltimore Symphony Orchestra was founded by the city of Baltimore in 1916 for the citizens of Baltimore and bears the distinction of being the only major orchestra in the United States established as a municipal entity. Whereas the BSO performs the highest quality symphonic music of all eras that nurtures the human spirit and is committed to engaging, inspiring, educating, and serving its audiences in a fiscally responsible manner, and contributes to making the state of Maryland a cultural center of vitality and importance. Whereas the BSO is internationally recognized as having achieved a preeminent place among the world's most important orchestras and is acclaimed for its enduring pursuit of artistic excellence while maintaining deep bonds in Maryland through innovative education and community outreach initiatives. It goes on, but I think that this alone emphasizes the importance of this institution, not only to Baltimore, but to its history and to the state of Maryland as a critical part of our arts and entertainment infrastructure, of our cultural heritage, and as many know, the BSO has taken painstaking efforts over the last year to become more financially solvent and to future-proof so that 104 years from now, when the orchestra is 208 years old, it can be a 208-year-old orchestra, that we are paving the way for this institution that has been critical to Baltimore for 104 years to remain for our children and our grandchildren and theirs and future generations. The funding vetoed by Governor Hogan is a critical part of the formula to make that possible. And so I am glad to put this resolution before the council. And Mr. President, I would ask for a waiving of the rules so that we can adopt this resolution immediately.
Before you do that, Councilman, I just want to chime in and say how critically important this is. You've laid out very, very masterfully what BSO means, but also understanding that this can be said for other entities, but we know this is directly tied to a piece of legislation. When Baltimore opens back up, we're going to have to realize, this is why I said early on in this COVID crisis that the city should be supporting our arts and cultural institutions, because we know how much they mean to the city, how much they mean to our vibrancy as a city, and we have to figure out ways to support them. So this, again, was another short-sighted veto. And sorry, Mr. Councilman, can you please make your motion again?
It's on the floor, Mr. Council President.
Without objection, the rules will be suspended. The rules are suspended. Roll call.
President Scott.
Yes.
Councilman Cohen.
Yes.
Councilwoman Mcrae.
Yes.
Councilman Dorsey.
Yes.
Councilman Henry.
Yes.
Councilman Schleifer.
Yes.
Vice President Middleton.
Yes.
Councilman Pinkett.
Yes.
Councilman Burnett.
Yes.
Councilman Bullock.
Yes.
Councilman Reisinger.
Yes.
Councilman Costello.
Yes.
Councilman Stokes.
Yes.
Councilwoman Sneed.
Yes.
Councilwoman Clark.
Yes.
The ayes have it. The motion is approved. This resolution has been adopted.
City Council Resolution 20-0227R, request for state action, override veto of House Bill 1260, historically black colleges and universities funding. For the purpose of calling on the Maryland General Assembly to override the governor's veto and pass House Bill 1260, historically black colleges and universities funding, as passage of this bill ensures equitable funding for Maryland's 4 historically black colleges and universities. Sponsors: Sneed, President Scott, Clark, Henry.
Please note, Councilman Bullock, Councilwoman Mcrae, Councilman Cohen, Councilman Burnett, Councilman Stokes, Councilman Reisinger, Councilman Pinkett as co-sponsors, Councilman Dorsey as a co-sponsor, and then Council Vice President Middleton as well. Chair recognizes Councilman Schleifer. Chair recognizes Councilwoman Sneed.
Thank you, Council President Scott. As a graduate of two historically Black universities in Maryland, University of Maryland Eastern Shore and Morgan State University, it's just not a place where I made like lifelong friends or where I crossed Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated, but it's where I transitioned from a student to a professional. It's there where I decided on my career in journalism and where I went on to earn my master's degree at Morgan State University. So when I look back at when I was in school, there are clear visible disadvantages in our programs, which stem from the duplication of programs at the other schools and a lack of funding for our school. I really remember ending my my senior year, actually my first semester of my senior year, and going into my internship in Salisbury at a television station. And the equipment was totally different from what I learned in school. And so it put me at a disadvantage because I had to be trained on this technology that I thought I was ready and prepared for. And so it kind of set me back a little bit. And I just want to say that we have to make sure, if we want to make sure that our students, when they graduate at HBCUs, that they have everything that they need, that the equipment is up to date, and that they can jump right in and really launch into their careers. So as a product of Maryland's higher education system, I not only urge our state officials to override the governor's veto, I beg them, I plead with them for the next generation of HBCUs grads, that they will have everything that they need. So I plead with them to end this. Don't let this go on for 14 more years, but give our students what they deserve now. So I just want to waive the rules for immediate adoption now.
Thank you, Councilwoman. And I just want to echo the sentiments that we know that Maryland's HBCUs and Baltimore's too in particular have produced people who have changed not only the history of our state, but our country and our world. And we know how long this underfunding and that this lawsuit that was involved in has been going on for quite a long time. And again, this is very short-sighted when you think about the history, the culture, the things that these two institutions in here in the city and the rest around the state have contributed to our state and our country. We know what the investment should be, and this investment is something that's going to be money well spent. Again, just as we said last week, now is the time to invest in education even more than before, not using COVID as a cloak of a reason not to do something. This should be a time where we're investing in education even more. Without objection, the rules will be suspended. The rules are suspended. Roll call.
President Scott.
Yes.
Councilman Cohen.
Yes, sir.
Councilwoman Mcrae.
Yeah.
Councilman Dorsey.
Yes.
Councilman Henry.
Yes.
Councilman Schleifer. Councilman Schleifer.
Yes.
Vice President Middleton.
Yes.
Councilman Pinkett.
Yes.
Councilman Burnett. Councilman Bullock.
Yes.
Councilman Reisinger.
Yes.
Councilman Costello.
Yes.
Councilman Stokes.
Yes.
Councilwoman Sneed.
Yes.
Councilwoman Clark.
Yes.
The ayes have it. The motion is approved. This resolution is adopted.
City Council Resolution 20-0228R, request for state action, override veto of Senate Bill 669, Prescription Drug Affordability Board and Fund, for the purpose of calling on the Maryland General Assembly to override the governor's veto and pass Senate Bill 669, Prescription Drug Affordability Board and Fund, as passage of this bill ensures access to affordable prescription drugs. Sponsor, Reisinger, President Scott, Clark, Henry.
Please add Councilman Bullock as a co-sponsor, Councilman Sneed as a co-sponsor, Councilman Burnett, Councilman Pinkett, Councilman Dorsey, Council Vice President Middleton as a co-sponsor, Councilman Cohen as a co-sponsor. Chair recognizes Councilman Reisinger. Councilman Stokes, co-sponsor. Chair recognizes Councilman Reisinger.
Mr. President, and members of the council, the purpose of this resolution is there are Marylanders across the state and especially Baltimore City that are struggling to afford the prescription drugs they need. Having to choose between the medicine and other necessities like rent and groceries, We need to make prescription drugs more affordable to all Marylanders, and especially Baltimore City. Mr. President, I move to suspend the rules.
Thank you, Councilman. I'm just going to say that we know again that our wonderful partners in the state legislature were doing great leadership, and when they put this forward, and we just hope that the governor realized at a time when people are struggling, especially our seniors and people who need this access, that this is something that we need. Without objection, the rules will be suspended. The rules are suspended. Roll call.
Yeah.
Oh, it's important that Councilman Schleifer is a co-sponsor as well. Roll call.
President Scott.
Yes.
Councilman Cohen.
Yes.
Councilwoman Mcrae.
Yes.
Councilman Dorsey.
Yes.
Councilman Henry.
Yes.
Councilman Schleifer.
Yes.
Vice President Middleton.
Yes.
Councilman Pinkett.
Yes.
Councilman Burnett.
Yes.
Councilman Bullock.
Yes.
Councilman Reisinger.
Yes.
Councilman Costello.
Yes.
Councilman Stokes.
Yes.
Councilwoman Sneed.
Yes.
Councilman Clark.
Yes.
The ayes have it. The motion is approved. This resolution is adopted.
City Council Resolution 20-0229R, acceleration of expanded broadband availability for our students for the purpose of calling on all wired and wireless internet service providers, nonprofit organizations, the business community, and the Baltimore City Public Schools and the City of Baltimore to accelerate expanded broadband availability programs to students in Baltimore City to support online distance learning during the COVID-19 public health emergency. Sponsors, President Scott, Clark, Henry.
Please add Councilman Bullock, Councilman Cohen, Councilwoman Vice President Middleton, Councilman Sneed, Councilman Pinkett, Councilman Burnett, Councilman Reisinger, Councilman Dorsey, Councilwoman Clark as co-sponsors. Thank you all. Thank you all. Make sure I got everybody there. Thank you all. We know last week the Board of Estimates approved the $3 million transfer of funds to address the digital divide that we worked on here in the council, myself and Councilman Cohen, that will provide not just physical laptops, but also internet access for our young people. But we know this is not enough, and these resources will be no use of our students if we still have so many that don't have access to reliable internet. This resolution calls on all wired and wireless internet service providers, nonprofit organizations, everyone in city schools in the city of Baltimore to come together to accelerate expanded broadband availability programs to students in Baltimore to support distance and online learning. I want to recognize the great work that we know that Comcast and Verizon are doing, and we want to bring everyone in, and we want to push them even further. We do not know how long our young people will be learning in this manner, and in Baltimore, a city where we know our young people are already facing odds that no other jurisdiction have to face, and we know what it means for them to lose and stay behind days. We have to do everything in our power to provide them the access to so that they can continue to learn. We cannot have them fall behind, especially when you know if young people are not reading at grade level by third grade, what that means to them, especially when you know if our students who are in high school are not able to participate and have the math and other essential learning that they need. We know that this is critical, and now is the time for us to bring everyone together to push this and make it happen. Chair recognizes Councilman Burnett.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move to suspend the rules for immediate adoption.
Without objection, the rules will be suspended. Rules are suspended. Roll call.
President Scott.
Aye.
Councilman Cohen.
Aye.
Councilwoman Mcrae.
Yes.
Councilman Dorsey.
Aye.
Councilman Henry.
Aye.
Councilman Schleifer.
Yeah.
Vice President Middleton.
Yes.
Councilman Pinkett.
Yes.
Councilman Pinkett.
Yes.
Councilman
Yes.
Burnett.
Yes.
Councilman Bullock.
Yes.
Councilman Reisinger.
Yes.
Councilman Costello.
Yes.
Councilman Stokes.
Yes.
Councilman Stokes.
Yes.
Councilwoman Sneed.
Yes.
Councilman
Yes.
Clark.
Did you call me?
Yes, ma'am. Councilwoman Clark.
Oh, yes.
The ayes have it. Motion is approved. This resolution has been adopted. Committee reports. We will now move to bills on second reader.
Mr. President.
Oh, yeah. Chair recognizes Councilman Costello.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that we read short titles for second and third reader for the duration of the hearing.
Without objection, short titles will be read for the remainder of the meeting. Short titles will be read for the remainder of the meeting. Housing and Urban Affairs Committee.
City Council Resolution 19-0477, solid waste surcharges exemption.
Chair recognizes Councilman Bullock.
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. The Housing and Urban Affairs Committee heard this bill on May 12, 2020. There are no amendments, and I move the bill favorable.
All those in favor of approving this bill say aye.
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 All those say nay. All right, the motion is approved. This bill moves to third reader. Judiciary Committee.
Nay.
Please note Councilman Dorsey as a nay.
I want to correct the record. That was a City Council bill, not resolution, Mr. President. City Council bill.
Please note Councilman Dorsey as a nay. Judiciary Committee.
City Council Bill 20-0522, Board of Municipal and Zoning Appeals, repeal of physically present requirements.
Chair recognizes Councilman Costello.
Thank you, Mr. President. We held a hearing on this bill. There are amendments in my colleague's inbox. I move the amendments.
Mr. President?
Roll call.
Chair recognizes Councilman Henry.
Thank you. I'm sorry I have to ask some questions. I received emails from constituents late this afternoon before I could follow up with individual committee members. And since I understand there's an effort to double read the bill, there won't be a chance to talk before next week. So will the chair make himself available for questions about the bill and the amendments?
Councilman Costello.
Councilman, right now? Yes, I'm happy to, if that's okay.
Thank you. The first question I have is the amendment that says, beginning on line 10 of page 2, strike it down through including the period in line 12, which is not the same as what is actually on the third reader version of this. But it does seem to intend to make this a permanent thing as opposed to a temporary provision to try to get us through the state of emergency. And I was wondering what happened during the committee hearing to change this from being a temporary measure to a permanent one.
Sure, that's a great.
Recognizes Councilman Costello.
I have the floor, Mr. President.
I said yes.
Thank you, Mr. President. Councilman, that's a great question. So, as you are likely aware, all of our other boards, whether it's Liquor Board, which is technically a state board, but also CHAP, as well as Planning Commission, have the ability to hold hearings online. The concern with passing this amendment was that if we were to have another outbreak of COVID in, say, the fall or the winter, which is a likely, which is not a ridiculous possibility, that if there was a sunset on this bill, it would require additional council action to come back and to take this action again. So the thought was, and I think all the committee members have agreement on this. Okay, I see Councilwoman Clark shaking her head no. I will say that I was in agreement on this, and I believe the majority of the committee members were in agreement on this. After talking with Derek Baumgartner, who's the executive director of BMZA, their intention is not to continue virtual hearings. It is only to have those virtual hearings while we are under stay-at-home order, and while social distancing is still important as we start to phase back into normal operations. But again, keep in mind there could be another COVID outbreak, which would require similar action and will slow BMZA down in the business that they have to get to.
Mr. President?
Now this Councilman Henry.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. That explains that, and I can convey that to my constituents. The other issue which they raised, which I acknowledge I myself did not note when I originally agreed to co-sponsor this, is I was taking this language as being intended to permit a virtual hearing, as you just described. But it was pointed out that the way that this has been done by removing the provision in page 2 of the bill that says that a member of the board may not vote on a matter unless they were present at the public hearing on the matter and present at the voting session. By striking that whole section rather than replacing physically with virtually or through telecommunications or whatever would be the appropriate term of art, what this now is also doing is it's allowing board members who weren't at a hearing and did not hear the testimony to vote on a matter that for any reason is tabled to a future meeting. And that does seem to be an unintended consequence, because I know, as you described, this was intended to allow them to continue to conduct business during social distancing. And this expands that in a way that I don't think was intended. And I'm sorry that, again, like I said, I'm sorry that this is just being brought to my attention this afternoon, because I wish I could have brought it to the committee's attention last week. Did anyone raise this issue at that hearing?
Recognizes Councilman Costello.
Thank you, Mr. President. Not to my recollection. I don't know I don't know where that issue came from. If you'll bear with me for one moment, I'm pulling up the second reader version of the bill. My understanding is that there was only one amendment, which was on
I'm sorry.
page 2 lines, because you referred to an amendment. I'll note the amendment.
Not an amendment. The actual
Councilman, hold on for a second. You have to be recognized, Councilman. Chair recognizes Councilman Henry.
I'm sorry if I misspoke. I wasn't referring to an amendment. I was referring to the text of the bill itself. On page 2 of the bill, it's removing a section of existing code that requires a member of the BMTA to have been present at the public hearing on a matter, as well as being present at the voting session. And I know that the intention of this was to allow people to hear and vote virtually, but the way it's been worded by this bill, it's going to allow a member who was absent for the hearing to vote at a later time if the vote on that matter is for any reason delayed to a later meeting. And I had constituents who were very concerned about issues where the board tables a matter and says it'll come back and deal with it later. Now that could potentially be with a different set of people participating.
Chair recognizes Councilman Costello.
Thank you, Mr. President. So I'm not reading it the same way. I would certainly defer to the law department in these matters. And the law department did do a pretty thorough review of this. Were pretty engaged during the hearing. So while I can certainly appreciate the concern that's been raised, I do not believe it's an issue, and deferring to the Department of Law, I can tell you that they don't believe that that's an issue. So I don't see a reason not to proceed. That being said, we can certainly raise this matter with the Department of Law after the fact, but by not proceeding today, this would push this out until at least June 15th, if I'm not mistaken, Mr. President. That's when the next council.
No, the councilman's right. Councilman Henry, do you have anything else before I go to Councilwoman Clark?
Well, I guess it would just be, I can save mine until afterwards, so no.
Councilwoman Clark.
Yes, Mr. President, members of the council, I hope that we will have a roll call vote on the amendment. That's the amendment that takes out the deadline at which this, at which they go back to personal attendance at zoning board hearings. So it is, the bill came to us with a time limit on the period at which there would be virtual meetings. That's what I understand the zoning board wanted. Planning Commission debated it at that level and brought the amendment that says lift out the termination date and just give them this privilege of virtual meetings from now on. So basically, that's what kills it for me. One, the zoning board didn't ask for it. It's more than they asked for. Secondly, I'm not sure that they actually asked for this, but okay. But third, that amendment to take out the termination deserves, at least from my perspective, a roll call vote, because I'm going to be held liable for it by my constituents. And the reason is, the zoning board is like Vox Populi. It's where people come, they organize, they have meetings, they carpool, they maybe even rent a van if it's a big deal, and they come down to face the zoning board and the opposition that exists that they're opposed to, and they are part of a process physically that is very, very important. Now, the reason we right this minute in the city council are doing this. And so I understand why it is that during this period, the zoning board, if it could do things that way, it might help. I don't know. But certainly, I expect us in the city council to go back to personal hearings and meetings and everything the moment we can under the regulations. And I would expect other agencies like the zoning board to do the same. And I'm not ready to say just change the whole zoning board so that it can be visual like that all the time and it's not in person. If there is one place where people come, besides the liquor board, where people come and have a chance to win a point, it's the zoning board. So I would like a separate vote on that amendment to just make this eternal and just defeat it. I'd like to see it defeated so we could terminate it just the way we'll be terminating our own virtuality. Thanks.
Chair recognizes Councilman Costello.
Thank you, Mr. President. A couple points of clarification to Councilman from the 4th District's point. I was reminded that the concerns that you raised on behalf of the Community Association were submitted in written testimony prior to the hearing in our record in the bill file. To the Councilwoman from the 14th District's comments, one, I would point out that while this is not what the MDA asked for in the initial bill, this initial bill was not introduced by the administration. It was introduced by the council member from the 5th District. The executive director did testify to the fact that this is what the BMZA wanted, specifically him as executive director, as well as the members of the BMZA. And third, to the councilwoman from the 14th District's point about BMZA being, a public board that neighbors carpool to, et cetera. The liquor board is the same way. We've seen the liquor board figure out how to effectively do these virtual hearings. And finally, fourth, to the councilwoman from the 14th District's point, I think it's really important to note that the executive director, speaking on behalf of himself as well as the BMZA board, was very clear that they would like to go back to in-person hearings as quickly as humanly possible, based on the guidance of public health professionals and the mayor, et cetera, but that they wanted the flexibility in order to be able to hold these virtual hearings should something happen in the future and not have to wait to go through the council process. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. And then before I call on anyone else, I know Councilman Dorsey is going to be next. I just also want to point out that I think that we also have to recognize the fact that in many cases of the virtual, we can just see with the interactions and engagement that we're having on the council meeting and things like that. For some of our constituents, it's actually easier for them to call into WebEx than to be able to get downtown and pay for parking. It actually is prohibitive for them to do that. They have to take off work and all these other things. So I think that we should consider, I want to go back to having meetings with the body, with everyone here, so it's not just me sitting in an empty chamber. But I also want us to understand that we have to consider that for access to the citizenry, that we should not just throw away digital meetings altogether once we're able to have them under the guise of the public health professionals come back to physical meetings. Chair recognizes Councilman Dorsey.
Thank you, Mr. Council President. I want to second the sentiments of your comments just now. The Planning Commission, and I'm sure Councilman Reisinger could speak to this, the Planning Commission, I think, is looking at ways of incorporating both live, in-person and virtual meeting for the future. And I think that hybrid is really a laudable goal for the city to create as great accessibility for others, as well as the members themselves. I think it's perfectly acceptable to have a system where members of a board or commission can be present physically in a meeting space or be present in a virtual capacity to interact with those present there. I think that's a laudable goal, and that we should be pursuing that as a city, and all these boards should be pursuing this as well as us. But that's not the same, and I just want to speak to Councilman Henry's point. That's not the same as what this bill says. This bill says very clearly that a person does not need to participate in order to vote in the work of that body. This bill absolves the members entirely of the need to show up and hear testimony, and basically says that they can vote by mail. They don't even have to be present to vote. That's my reading of it, and the law department's report is silent on that, as far as I can tell. It does not speak to that, just as their report speaks to it as something that sunsets at the end of this state of emergency. And I would note that in the BMCA report on this, it says specifically, this bill merely reinforces the board's legal authority to hold virtual meetings. It does not grant any new ability to do so. And so addressing this state of emergency is something that they are already doing, just as Councilwoman Clark did, just as we are as a body, that it's actually not necessary. And so to the council, to the chair of the committee, Councilman Costello, my question is, was it entertained that during the hearing that an amendment be made so that the provisions of this go beyond this state of emergency and be applicable in states of emergency in the future, but not all the time?
Chair recognizes Councilman Costello.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm of the mindset that we should proceed with this, and if we believe this to be imperfect, we have time to introduce an ordinance on June 15th and get this correct. That's my view. That's my opinion. As to your direct question, Councilman from the 3rd District, I don't believe that this was directly addressed. Again, I'm deferring to the law department here. knowing that they did a pretty thorough review of the bill. I don't necessarily read it or interpret it the way that you do. I think things are always open for interpretation. But I also know that we need to move forward and make sure that we have a functioning DMCA. And right now, we don't have a functioning DMCA. So, thank you, Mr. President.
Chair recognizes Councilman Dorsey.
Thank you. I would say we do have a functioning BMZA. They said in their report that this bill grants them no authority that they do not already have. To an earlier point, no matter how much this BMZA and its director right now say they want to go back to things the way they were, what this bill ensures is that they don't ever have to. The law as it exists requires certain things that are in the public interest, and this bill strips those things away. I think that's a problem. Thank you, Mr. President.
All right, Councilman Henry, then Councilwoman Clark, and then we're going to proceed.
Thank you, Mr. President. I do want to, first of all, as Councilman Dorsey did, I want to agree with you about the point of this bill. I think we're all in agreement that the point of this bill is to make certain that we can have working agencies of government during this crisis. I co-sponsored it. Of course, I agree with that. Where I'm concerned is both by Councilman Dorsey's reading of the Law Department's report saying that they can already have virtual meetings in the sense of they can have the board come down to City Hall and be socially distant, and they can put that onto WebEx, and the public can participate without having to come and squeeze into the Board of Estimates hearing room. What they want is the ability for the board members to not have to physically be there, which I agree, that's a laudable thing to do. It's just that now that it has been brought to our attention that the way this bill is worded doesn't simply allow that, but actually allows far more that is potentially detrimental to the public's cases, it would seem it would be worthwhile to just pause for and allow the normal legislative process to occur so that we can have conversations with the Law Department and with the BMZA between second reader and third reader. That's why you have second reader and then third reader. All I'm saying is I think, Mr. Chair, Mr. President, colleagues, it would be worthwhile to hold off on third reader until the next meeting so that we can straighten this part out. Because if this is in fact problematic and just no one asked the Law Department this particular question, we shouldn't have to start an entire legislative process over again to fix it, when we could just fix it by putting it off for one meeting. Thank you, Mr. President.
You recognize Councilwoman Clark.
Yes. Sorry, I think that's a very good solution to a very difficult problem we're in, because we have a bill that one colleague says they don't even need a bill. They say they don't even need a bill. Well, if in those circumstances, in another circumstance, I'd move the bill back to committee. But I think the idea is fine of doing second reader and not suspend to do third reader, so we have time to figure out, to sort out what this is. What I am asking, however, is that we at least have a roll call vote so that the amendment itself will get a vote up or down. The amendment being to extend this bill beyond the limits of the emergency that we're in. And the reason is, here we are looking at each other on TVs, and you all look wonderful, really. But where are the people? They're home, maybe watching TV or maybe turning it off about now. But with a zoning board, with a city council hearing, with things that affect people, people want to be there. We moved the time of zoning board hearings to 5 p.m. against all their wishes, because it was another board. And then they finally said, well, nobody comes. They don't want to come at 5. So we've been through all this. So let's vote on this. Let's vote on the amendment separately, if you would. Oh, that's my phone. I'm sorry. I turned it down. It's just broken. So let's vote on the amendment. I'm opposed. I would like everybody to join me in letting people have some say about what happens at the zoning board in the future beyond this crisis. So, and then do what you want with it. If it's on second reader, let's hold it there, get it fixed, bring it back in the next council meeting. Thank you, Mr. President. Sorry about my phone. It's just, I turned it down.
Thank you. Thank you, Councilwoman. It gives us some sense of normalcy, so don't worry. Chair recognizes Councilman Costello.
Thank you, Mr. President. There's a motion on the floor. I move the committee amendments and call for roll call on the committee amendments.
Roll call.
President Scott,
Yes.
Councilman Cohen,
No.
Councilwoman Mcrae,
Yes.
Councilman Dorsey,
No.
Councilman Henry, Councilman Schleifer,
Yes.
Vice President Middleton,
No.
Councilman Pinkett,
Yes.
Councilman Burnett,
No.
Councilman Bullock,
Yes.
Councilman Reisinger,
Yes.
Councilman Costello,
Yes.
Councilman Stokes,
Yes.
Councilwoman Sneed,
No.
Councilwoman Clark.
No.
Mr. President, you have 8 in the affirmative and 7 in the negative.
All right. Chair recognizes Councilman Costello.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move the bill favorably as amended.
All those in favor of approving this bill, say aye.
Mr. President,
Aye.
roll call.
Roll call. Roll call. Roll call.
President Scott,
Yes.
Councilman Cohen,
No.
Councilwoman Mcrae,
Yeah.
Councilman Dorsey,
No.
Councilman Henry,
No.
Councilman Schleifer,
Mr. President, can I explain my vote?
Yes. Chair recognizes Councilman Schleifer. You have the floor, sir.
So I just want to remind everybody what prompted this whole bill to begin with. I have a constituent who's diagnosed with ALS and who needed to build a one-story addition to his property. He missed this whole situation by 1 day in trying to get his case heard. I think there was a posting issue about getting it posted 21 days before. Next thing you know, we're in a state of emergency that we're in currently. And this constituent, unfortunately, has been deteriorating. And so therefore, he reached out to me. I reached out to the various city agencies to see what alternatives there were to get this guy to be able to build his one-story addition so he can live on the ground floor of his home so that he can stay in his home and have that all constructed and done before he unfortunately will not be able to live in his own house. And so that's what prompted this whole conversation. Surely there was the conversation that they do have the authority anyways, but certainly this is not just a situation that happened this one time. Obviously, this is an extended period of a stay-at-home, state emergency, but we have other state of emergencies, and there's real life consequences to our constituents that, you know, when we halt certain operations of the city. And so it's really hard to explain to a constituent why a liquor hearing can take place, but they can't have a one room built onto their house or have a hearing on that, even with the community association and all neighbor support, why, you know, their medical condition that's going to force them to move out of their house if this isn't done, why the city doesn't need to prioritize that, but the liquor store up the street can get a liquor license or have a liquor hearing at the same period. And so that's really what prompted this whole conversation. And so I vote yes.
Vice President Middleton.
My vote's a no. Based on listening to the conversation, it seems like we still some work to do, and there's no need to rush this. So it's a no.
Councilman Pinkett.
Yes.
Councilman Burnett.
Mr. President, I'd like to explain my vote as well. Thank you. So I share the Council Vice President's concerns and others. Obviously, very empathetic to the conditions that Councilmember Schleifer described and the health conditions that that gentleman is going through, and absolutely want to expand digital access to these hearings as far as we possibly can. But I think, you know, we in this body have double-read things before, expedited changes before. I don't see why further work can't be done to get this right, or to keep the sunset in the bill so that we revisit it and move that as quickly as possible. I think there's ways to get us to a 21st century city that uses both technology and in-person opportunities for people to maximize engagement. And, you know, I'm in support of that, in support of the concept moving forward. I just don't think that the process is adequate at this time, so I'm going to...
Point of order for everyone. Just note that this is the vote to move it to second reader, and my understanding is that the chairman is only asking for second reader today and not to double read the bill. Chair recognizes Councilman Costello.
Mr. President, we are in the middle of a roll call vote.
Oh, that's right. Sorry.
Mr. President, point of order.
Point of order. Chair recognizes Councilman Costello.
Thank you, Mr. President. Your Legislative Director Kalen's point, yes, this vote is on the bill favorably as amended on second reader. And yes, Mr. President, that is correct. I will not be making the motion to move the bill to third reader on the same day. Thank you, Mr. President.
Councilman Bullock.
Yes.
Councilman Reisinger.
Yes.
Councilman Costello.
Yes.
Councilman Stokes.
Yes.
Councilwoman Sneed.
Yes.
Councilwoman Clark.
Wait a minute. This is on the bill as amended, no.
Mr. President, point of order. Mr. President, point of order.
Chair recognizes Councilman Costello.
Thank you, Mr. President. To the Councilwoman from the 14th District's question, this is a vote on the bill favorably as amended on second reader. This is
Yes. And my vote is,
Councilwoman,
I'm sorry.
you muted yourself. Chair recognizes Councilwoman Clark.
My vote is no on the bill as amended. As I said in committee, if the amendment's adopted, I'm voting against the bill, and so that's what I'm doing now. People involved in this decision. All right. Thank you for not going to third reader.
Mr. President, 9 ayes and 6 nays.
All right, the ayes have it. The motion is approved. This bill moves now to third reader. We will now, go ahead, continue. Chair recognizes Councilman Costello.
Mr. President, Kalen.
Oh, yes, Caitlin. Caitlin has to go to the resolution.
Yes, sir. City Council Resolution 0523R, approval for the exchange of a Class BD7 license for use at 3607 Fleet Street to a Class A7 license for use at 5601 Eastern Avenue, known as 5701A Fleet Street.
Chair recognizes Councilman Costello.
Thank you, Mr. President. I hope that this bill elicits far less discussion and is far less. There are amendments in my colleague's inbox. I move the amendments.
All those in favor of moving the amendment say aye.
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 All opposed say no.
Aye.
The amendments are approved. Chair recognizes Councilman Costello.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move the bill favorably as amended.
All those in favor of approving this bill say aye.
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 All opposed
Aye.
say nay. The motion is approved. This resolution is approved. Transportation Committee.
City Council Bill 20-0532, temporary street space for pedestrians and cyclists.
Chair recognizes Councilman Dorsey.
Thank you, Mr. Council President. The Transportation Committee held a hearing on this bill and voted favorably, unanimously. I move the bill favorable.
All those in favor of approving this bill say aye.
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 Aye. All opposed say nay. Chair recognizes Councilman Costello. He had his hand raised. Councilman Costello? No.
Yes, I hear you.
Can you hear?
I hear him.
Okay.
Mr. President, I'll reserve my comments for third reader vote.
All right.
Mr. Council President,
Chair recognizes Councilman Dorsey.
I wanted to ask if you, as the sponsor of this bill, had any comments to the bill before I make a motion here to move the bill to third reader on the same day.
Yes, Mr. Councilman, again, I think this is, again, for me, about us trying to push as we're dealing with the continuing COVID situation and understanding we need to create space and opportunity for our residents to be outside, for our businesses to possibly be able to operate in a different way, and for us to have people doing that through while still practicing physical distancing and following the advice of public health professionals. I understand that this is something large, but I think that it's something that we can do in working in partnership. Thank you. Chair recognizes Councilman Dorsey.
Thank you, Mr. Council President. I'd like to waive the rules, suspend the rules in order to move the bill to third reader for final passage today.
Mr. President, discussion?
Chair, for two things. First, Councilman Dorsey, the motion is approved. First motion was approved. The bill is going to move to third reader. Chair recognizes there's a motion on the floor, Councilman, so wait 1 second. Without objection,
No.
Oh, go ahead. Sorry. Oh, sorry. I didn't see.
No.
Chair recognizes Councilman Costello. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like discussion on this, and I'm also calling for a roll call on this vote. I certainly appreciate the President's intention here. That being said, this is a pretty sweeping piece of legislation that we're talking about passing that was introduced just a week ago. We're talking about potentially sending it to the mayor's desk for signature 7 days later after one hearing in committee in a 3-person committee. I would point out to my colleagues, especially the chairman of the Transportation Committee, everything that we went through dealing with one simple bike lane in the 1st Councilmanic District and a series of hearings with the fire department and all of the different moving pieces that went into that. I am extremely concerned that we would pass a sweeping bill of this nature calling for 25 miles of bike lanes to be installed in the city pretty much immediately without any type of community input, without a more robust discussion, And there's simply no way that I can support moving something of this magnitude to third reader on the same day without more dialogue and more input from the public. Thank you, Mr. President. And just to reiterate, I'm calling for a roll call on that vote after discussion has ended. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. And I just want to Councilman's point, understand that like we have had in this process of COVID, entire streets be closed by the administration. And we know that these are things that we support and they're the right thing to do. And this is, again, always we have to work with our community. But we know that we have to. We can hear the outcry from people. We can hear the outcry from especially businesses who want to be able to further the way they operate in the streets with pedestrians and other folks. And I think, Councilman, you call for a roll call vote? Roll call.
Mr. Council President.
If I may respond to your...
Chair recognizes Councilman Dorsey.
Thank you, Mr. Council President. I just wanted to give, I think, what I believe is a better characterization to the intention of this bill. It is not to create 25 miles of bike lanes. It is to create 25 miles of space for people to use public space more safely and in a manner that is suited to the current conditions. As an example of what those current conditions are, we've seen a dramatic reduction in the number of vehicles being driven in the city. And so our already significant allocation of public space to the use of automobiles is even more out of proportion now with the way or the scale on which it's being used for that purpose of driving automobiles at a time when space for pedestrians and others is of the utmost importance for the sake of public health and safety. And this bill does not call for anything like what has been referenced on Potomac Street in Southeast Baltimore, whereas that is a permanent change that was essentially derailed in the 11th hour after years and years and years of public engagement and a years-long federal funding process and many community associations being engaged there. That was over a permanent change. And here, what we're talking about is incredibly temporary changes in neighborhoods so that it's a little bit safer for children and families and people of all mobility abilities to get out and use their streets in front of their homes as something more like community and recreational spaces, particularly in communities that lack direct and immediate access to recreational facilities. And in places where, as I said, the use of cars is significantly decreased, where we have multiple lanes on streets, just asking that the Department of Transportation temporarily use some more of that space for people, for pedestrians, and for cyclists and people with mobility devices, since it's being used so much less by cars at present. And as a final note here, while those cars are being driven in a less safe fashion than usual, since the commencement of the state of emergency, we have seen a 25% increase in the tickets that are being issued by red light and speed cameras, and that's not unique to Baltimore, and that we should use that as a barometer to understand just how much more perilous our transportation environment is for everybody in it, and the need to immediately ask the DOT aggressively make changes in order to make it safer for everybody. And I would say to further the council president's point, that this is something that we have been discussing with DOT since the beginning of the state of emergency, and I have every confidence that it is fully within their capacity to implement the requirements of this bill in the time allocated by it. Thank you, Mr. Council President.
Chair recognizes Councilman Stokes. Councilman, you're on mute.
Same way that some bike lanes, I'm off of
You're
mute.
good. Yeah, you're good. You're good now.
Okay. I support this. I support bike lanes, but in the 12th district, there were bike lanes put in parts of the 12th district with no community support, no community input. We're going to introduce this bill real fast and open up these spaces in communities, and a lot of people in the community probably don't even know this happening in their neighborhood. I believe we need to have some more community input in terms of having this conversation and stop rushing it through like we're doing now, because the same thing happened with this, happened on bike lanes on Preston Street, happened on bike lanes on Bitter Street. People go up there, have bike lanes. I'm the one that got the phone calls. So I think we should look at that in terms of finding a way to inform the community more about this piece of introduction to the Department of Transportation.
Thank you, Councilman. And just remember for the record that this is not about bike lanes, right? This is not simply about a bike lane conversation. When you look at the piece of legislation, it's a lot more than that. As always, we're going to push DOT to have community involvement, but there may be neighborhoods in East Baltimore in the 12th District who want to put a portion of the street for them to be able to actually just be outside and practice physical distancing so that they're able to be out on their stoops and not have to be so congregated together. This is what this is about. This is legislation and policy that we've seen, and as the council chairman of the Transportation Committee pointed out, it's something that we've been pushing for forever, right? When you think about what some of us signed on to a letter talking about how we need to do this, because we understand that this is the reality. As it gets warmer, this is the same reason why I wrote the mayor last week and said that the city needs to purchase at bare minimum 300,000 masks, because we know people that live in East Baltimore and West Baltimore, once it hits 80, 85 degrees, they can't be in the house, right? We have to be able to have them. They're going to be outside, and we have to, as a city, build ways for them to do that while able to still follow the public health advice and create opportunities for that, right? So people that are walking, young people that are going to be out in front of their houses and want to be able to be out there and, talk to their friends in a acceptable way to keep physical distance. Understanding the situations where people live in. Not saying that we're going to have the department go to every neighborhood and just do whatever. We always want them to work with the community. That's how I operate. However, if we do not say that they have to do something, they will do nothing. Councilman Cohen had his hand up.
Thank you, Mr. President. Since my district in Southeast Baltimore has been referenced a few times in reference to the Potomac Street bike lane, did want to just share that there was several years of planning that went into that. Community association signed off on it. There were many, many, many meetings. There was an effort toward the end to undermine and actually rip it out. And I remember calling the former mayor literally at the 11th hour at 11 p.m. the night before she was going to tear out the cycle track, and asking her not to do that, and saying that, despite the pressure that was being built, that this actually was a good thing, and that it was helping some of my constituents who need to get to work and don't have a vehicle be able to do that. Fortunately, she didn't. The cycle track remains, and today, very, very, very few people complain about it. I hear, honestly, almost no complaints. Is it perfect? Does it solve all of our transit woes? No, but it gets used. And honestly, the people that were most frustrated seem okay these days. So I would just say that in support of this bill and in support of Councilman Dorsey, I do think community input is going to be critically important, but that this is the direction we should move. And if it requires a hard push on DOT from this council, I'm all for that, and I think we'll be okay.
Chair recognizes Councilman Clark.
I just want to give an example of what the interest in the 14th district right now. Of course, we have Lake Montebello that's now been closed to traffic, and very excited about that. But in talking about this in my district, this plan, one proposal that I hope will get approved is a very simple one. There's a southbound small lane with houses, and across is a park. There's a northbound lane, small with houses, a park across there too. And so under this program, what that neighborhood is talking about is, okay, in the afternoon, maybe from 2 to 5 or something, we can put blockades up so that the kids know it's safe to run out of the house, run out across the street, go play in the park. We'll be with them, but every block has a captain anyway because of the coronavirus and helping elder people. And so there's a block captain, and they'll help move the blockades around and pull them when the car needs to go by, like a mail car. So basically what they're saying is let these two streets, these narrow residential streets, get blocked for a few hours under this program. There's a main street a block further west that people can use to go north and south. But that way in the afternoon during this coronavirus and pandemic, kids and their families will be safe to just run across the street and play in the park. That's not going to cost a lot of money, and it's going to be a volunteer-driven plan. And so that's what, in my district, people have in mind, and they're pushing back against any extravagant thing on the main retail streets. They're looking for things like this. And I hope that you will consider that when you cast your votes. I understand that I was at the hearing, but I also understand a self-help program would also be very good for this city if we let that happen through this plan. Thank you.
Councilwoman Sneed, Council Vice President Middleton, then Councilman Costello.
I just have a question. We are not going to close off any streets without residents knowing. Is that correct, Councilman Dorsey? Like, we just wouldn't come and close off Fayette Street without letting the residents know that this is going to happen.
Councilman Dorsey, I can address it and then go to you too. Yes, it's the simple answer, Councilwoman. This is something that, again, we want to be community-based. It's not going to be decisions made unilaterally. It's going to be based on community having discussion. Chair, Councilman Dorsey, do you want to chime in? Nope.
No, Mr. Council President.
Council Vice President Middleton.
Just to add a question, I know we're getting input from, and you're referencing the Department of Transportation, but is this going to include approval from the fire department and police department as well, making that decision so it doesn't stop wherever you decide, it won't stop their response time?
Thank you, Council Vice President. The bill was actually approved for legal sufficiency from the law department, and no issues to that matter were brought up. But as always, Council Vice President, just like with speed bumps or any changes that the Department of Transportation makes, they always have to coordinate with their counterparts in the public safety arena. Chair recognizes, yes, Councilman Costello, I can find you.
Thank you, Mr. President. And I want to be clear on a couple things. One, I do support this concept. I appreciate what you're attempting to do here. Two, I'd like to acknowledge, because my initial comment didn't fully reflect the global picture here, that this is not just about bike lanes. This is about opening up the public right-of-way for everyone's use. But three, my main concern here deals with, and I appreciate what you pointed out about public input into this and that DOT is required by the bill to get public feedback. The problem with the bill, as I see it, is that DOT has to implement this in 14 days. I know that the chair of the Transportation Committee was engaged in discussions with DOT about Lake Montebello. I know that other council members have been engaged about discussions about Druid Hill Park and understand the initial opposition from community members about this. To expect the Department of Transportation, when it took them 2+ months with a focused approach, despite some of my colleagues may disagree with that, it took them 2+ months to get Lake Montebello done. To expect them to turn around 25 miles in 14 days is alien. It's not humanly possible. So I just want to be clear about that what we're mandating DOT do is not possible. Is it aggressive? Yes. Should we be aggressive with agencies? Should we push them to do more and do more quickly? Absolutely. That's our role as the City Council. It is incumbent upon us to push the administration and push agencies to be more effective. But to ask them to do something that we know is impossible to do, 25 miles in 14 days, is unrealistic. And that's my concern with pushing a bill with this type of far-sweeping policy to third reader on the same day. Thank you, Mr. President.
Chair recognizes Chairman Dorsey.
Thank you, Mr. Council President. I'm just going to say I completely reject the idea that this is impossible or that the administration took a focused approach over the last couple of months. It didn't take 2.5 months to close Montebello. It took 2.5 months or 2 months or whatever to find the political will to close Montebello. The closure itself was an act that took a half an hour. It takes almost no effort to make these things happen. One thing that we discussed during the hearing, and which I continue to discuss afterward with DOT, is how this is a bill about, first and foremost, empowering communities to be in the driver's seat. That DOT could implement this bill by doing nothing more than being a repository for communities saying, we want to close this street. And DOT could simply catalog the closures that communities themselves are driving. And if we put the word out there to communities that they can have more calm traffic on their streets by doing nothing more than hand painting some cardboard signs with their children who are home from school right now and propping them up on chairs in the street and saying no through traffic. This is a place for people, that we could rack up 25 miles in no time with just that. The other part that I think is really important for us to realize in a practical sense here is that even if we move this on third reader today, the mayor has the time of 3 more council meetings to determine whether or not he will sign or veto this bill or let it go into effect without his signature. It could be a month and a half from now before their 14-day clock starts ticking at DOT. And I know from my weeks and weeks and weeks of discussion about this with DOT that they have been discussing exactly how they can make this happen already extensively within the department for weeks and weeks and weeks at this point. If they aren't ready to do this another 6 weeks from now, then that's a failure of leadership. They absolutely have the capacity to do this. Thank you, Mr. Council President.
Thank you. Mr. Councilman, I'm going to recognize you again, as I know you want to invoke the rules, so you need to make the motion.
Thank you, Mr. Council President. I make the motion to suspend the rules in order to move this bill onto third reader for final passage today.
Roll call.
President Scott,
Yes.
Councilman Cohen,
Yes.
Councilwoman Mcrae,
Yes.
Councilman Dorsey,
Yes.
Councilman Henry, Councilman Schleifer,
Yes.
Vice President Middleton,
Yes.
Councilman Pinkett.
I'd like to explain my vote.
Go ahead, Councilman.
It would be a supreme understatement to say that the COVID-19 pandemic has turned our world upside down. It has challenged every aspect of our society, causing us to adjust and reevaluate the way that we perform the most menial as well as the most sophisticated tasks. But within this disruption that we all are bearing is the great opportunity to affect change in a way that we might not have been so eager to entertain in the past. It is long overdue for our city and its Department of Transportation to prioritize in a consistent and equitable way the safety and access of the diversity of users that occupy our streets. This resolution is an opportunity to do so, if only for the sake of accommodating the pedestrians, cyclists, and other abled users who require this space in light of the various executive orders. But just like it should not take a pandemic for us to address the health disparities, food insecurity, and lack of economic opportunity in our city, we should not have to be in the midst of a pandemic to respond and support our communities who've been demanding a traffic calming for years. While I'm excited about this resolution, I'm troubled that it would take this crisis to push our city towards a place where we should already be. As we move forward and ultimately reach the end of this state of emergency, DOT must increase the resources and staff committed to making our streets safe for everyone, and do so in a way that supports all communities without partiality. And that can't wait until the next crisis. I vote yes.
Councilman Burnett,
Yes.
Councilman Bullock,
Yes.
Councilman Reisinger,
Yes.
Councilman Costello,
No.
Councilman Stokes.
Let me explain my vote. All I'm asking now, just if we have more input on this, I support the bill. I think it's something that we need to do. So I vote yes.
Councilwoman Sneed,
Yes.
Councilwoman Clark.
I'm voting yes. I'd like to thank all my colleagues who have spoken so highly of Lake Montebello in the 14th City Council District. We are very collegial to all our visitors and guests. Thank you. I would also like to say that, hey, this is like when we have a crisis around here. It's communities that save us. It's communities that put us back together again. It's communities that lead. And this project is made to order for communities to take charge, to keep it to scale, and to run it for and with the community. We're volunteering our people with food, distribution, and all kinds of help for our neighbors. This is just an extension of a system that has built itself up during this pandemic. Amen. Build. Yes.
The ayes have it. This bill will move to third reader today. Third reader requiring the invocation of City Council Rule 12-1 for a same-day advancement from second to third reader.
City Council Bill 20-0522.
Nope. Kaylin, this one is not. We didn't do that one. That's just second reader. So it's just.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for the correction, sir. City Council Bill 20-0532, temporary street space for pedestrians and cyclists. President Scott, Cohen, Mcrae, Dorsey, Henry, Schleifer, Middleton, Pinkett, Burnett, Bullock, Reisinger, Costello, Stokes, Sneed, Clark.
Councilman Costello, you want to be noted as a no? You're on mute, Councilman.
I'm a yes, Mr. President.
Okay, thank you. This bill is approved. Third reader for final.
Yes.
City Council Bill 19-0381, Charter Amendment, removal of elected officials. President Scott, Cohen, Mcrae, Dorsey,
No.
Henry, Schleifer, Middleton, Pinkett, Burnett, Bullock, Reisinger, Costello, Stokes, Sneed, Clark.
Please note Councilwoman Mcrae as a no.
City Council Bill 20-0382, Actually, Mr. President, bill is approved.
Yeah, the bill is approved.
City Council Bill 20-0503, University of Maryland at Baltimore, approving application for designation as a RISE zone, granting enhanced local property tax credit. President Scott, Cohen, Mcrae, Dorsey, Henry, Schleifer, Middleton, Pinkett, Burnett, Bullock, Reisinger, Costello, Stokes, Snead, Clark.
Mr. President?
Yeah, Councilman Costello.
Thank you, Mr. President. I tried to hit the unmute button, but I was a no on the previous vote on the charter amendment.
Okay.
Thank you. And also on this bill, I have to
You abstain? Yeah, please note Councilman Costello as an abstention to this bill.
and you got me as a no on the previous.
On the previous bill, yes, sir.
Thank
This
you,
bill is approved.
City Council Bill 20-0521, Supplementary General Fund Operating Appropriation, Sheriff, $37,600. President Scott, Cohen, Mcrae, Dorsey, Henry, Schleifer, Middleton, Pinkett, Burnett, Bullock, Reisinger, Costello, Stokes, Snead, Clark.
This bill is approved. Committee announcement. Members, when you hear your committee, please proceed with your committee announcement. Budget and Appropriations Committee, and Councilman, you can do both of your committees, all of the committees once you have any.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move to suspend Rule 10.3 to announce a hearing.
Without objection, the rules will be suspended. The rules are suspended. Chair recognizes Councilman Costello.
Thank you, Mr. President. The Budget and Appropriations Committee will hold a hearing on Wednesday, May 27th at 3:03 p.m. This will be a virtual WebEx meeting on Mayor and City Council Resolution 20-0533, operating budget for the Baltimore City Board of School Commissioners for the fiscal year ending June 30, 2021. And, Mr. President, I do not have any announcements for Judiciary. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. Education and Youth Committee, Councilman Cohen.
No, sir.
Thank you. Equity and Structure, Councilman Henry.
Thank you, Mr. President. The Equity and Structure Committee will have a work session for City Council 20-0504 Charter Amendment City Council composition using the WebEx format on Wednesday, May 27th at 11 a.m.
Thank you. Thank you. Executive Appointments Committee, Councilman Stokes.
I have nothing, Mr. President.
Thank you. Health Committee, Councilman Burnett.
Wanted to also note that
Councilman, you have the floor. All right.
Second one, and that's kind of odd that you got two. But yeah, my recommendation will be to this.
Councilman, we'll come back to Councilman Burnett. He seems to be having a little bit of technical difficulty. We will go to Housing and Urban Affairs. Councilman Bullock.
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. So the Housing and Urban Affairs Committee will be having a hearing on Tuesday, June 9th. It will be for City Council Bill City Council Bill 190436, and that is ordinance city streets closing 3 10-foot alleys. That will be at 3:27 p.m., followed by the next hearing, which will be at 3:28 p.m. On the same day, Tuesday, June 9th, which is ordinance city streets closing 3 10-foot alleys. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. Labor Committee, Councilwoman Snead.
I don't have anything for labor.
Thank you. We'll see if Councilman Burnett is back. Legislative Investigations, Councilman Burnett.
All right, y'all, I'm losing. I'm dropping all one back.
Councilman Burnett?
No, nothing, no hearing to announce.
Oh, thank you. Land Use Committee, Councilman Rath.
Mr. President, I move to suspend Rule 10-3 to announce a hearing.
Without objection, the rules will be suspended. The rules are suspended. Chair recognizes Councilman Ratzinger.
The Land Use Committee will hold a hearing on Wednesday, June 24th at 1:15 p.m. on Bill 20-0531. That's a rezoning 3006, 2926, and 2928 Boynton Avenue, and Block 3185, Lot 49. And this year will be conducted as a WebEx virtual meeting. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. We will now move to the Public Safety Committee. Councilman Schleifer.
Nothing to announce, Mr. President.
Thank you. Taxation, Finance, and Economic Development, Council Vice President Middleton.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to suspend Rules 10.2 and 10.3 to announce a hearing.
Without objection, the rules will be suspended. The rules are suspended. Chair recognizes Council Vice President Middleton.
Thank you, Mr. President. The Taxation, Finance, and Economic Development Committee will hear Bill number 20-0534. That's the sale of property of 5001 Ricestown Road, aka Langston Hughes Elementary School. The hearing will take place on June 4th at 11:05 a.m. And it will be a virtual hearing. Thank you.
Thank you. Transportation Committee, Councilman Dorsey.
Mr. President, I have no hearings to announce, but if I did, they would be at weird times like 3:27 and 3:28 p.m. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Councilman. Regular announcements. I will start off by first saying that I will ask the Council Vice President to honor a moment of silence for the now 108 victims of homicides in the city of Baltimore this year and all we've lost to COVID-19 and the continued overdose crisis. I also want to address directly the city of Baltimore and especially Baltimoreans in reference to continue to be in a stay-at-home order. Public health and public science will guide how the city moves forward in regards to reopening. Some of the activity that we saw this weekend is not only okay, it's irresponsible. We have to make sure that we're not just risking our own lives, but the lives of friends and family and people that we love. We know we all want the city of Baltimore to reopen, but that has to be done in accordance with public health informed ways that considers health and safety over everything. That is the most important thing that we have to focus on right now, both with COVID-19 and with the continued epidemic of violence in Baltimore City. Last week, I wrote Mayor Young prior to his announcement asking that we remain in a stay-at-home order until these things become a reality. 2 weeks of sustained reductions in cases, 2 weeks of sustained reductions in mortality, the adequate testing and contract tracing program to support the ability for us to trace down where these cases are. We also know we have to see continued drops in hospitalizations due to COVID-19. In addition, as I said earlier, I requested that the mayor purchase 300,000 facial masks for residents in Baltimore City to be distributed with our food giveaways, to be distributed by the individuals from our Safe Streets, our other community workers, and even community partners. As we know, Baltimore is moving into the warmer months, and we have to provide in every way possible the ability for our citizens in Baltimore to be protected and protecting other people from themselves as we practice physical distancing. I stand by my call and understand that we cannot have people and or businesses not adhering to the stay-at-home order. It's the best thing to do, not just for you personally, but for those who you love. And with that, I will see who else has remarks. Going to go the opposite way this time. We're going to go 1 through 14. So Chair recognizes Councilman Cohen for any remarks.
All set. Thank you, sir.
Okay, Councilwoman Mcrae. All right, Councilman Dorsey.
Thank you, Mr. Council President. Nothing to report.
Councilman Henry. All right, Councilman Schleifer. All right, we will now go to Councilman Pinkett. All right, Councilman Burnett. Councilman Bullock.
No announcement. And yes, thank you, Mr. President. Apologies, there's one more hearing announcement that I would be glad to have, and that is for Tuesday, June 9th,
3:29 p.m., and this is City Council Bill 190438, ordinance city streets closing North Durham Street and 16-foot alley. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. Chair recognizes Councilman Reisinger.
Good.
Councilman Costello.
No announcements.
All right, Councilman Stokes. All right, Councilwoman
No
Smith.
announcements.
All right, Councilwoman Clark. All right, Chair recognizes, Councilwoman Clark, you're on mute.
Yep, I do.
Yep, yes, ma'am.
I just want to say that by the next time we come back into a meeting, the primary elections will be over. And we have been through ransomware, we're going through coronavirus, and now we're going through where are the ballots. I have had more calls about that than about the spy plane in the last couple days. So what I'm saying is this: when they come, mail them right away. I'm going to take them to a post office if I can, so I can see them being stamped with the date. They have boxes around town, but none around our district. So the other place to take and drop into a box is going to be outside the Housing Department building, 417 East Fayette. These boxes are in 5 locations in the city. They get emptied every night and taken into election headquarters, beginning on Fayette Street, beginning now, and they will be there every day, and every day they will be taken inside, emptied, and the empty box put back out. I'm not trusting the mail because it's not getting the ballots to us. I don't trust it to get it back in time for our votes to count. So let's take extra efforts to make sure we mail it right away, or we take it and take it to our local post office and watch them stamp it. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you. And thank you, Councilwoman. You know that this is something that I, along with Councilman Burnett, have been pressuring folks on to get the ballots to our citizens in a timely fashion. Chair recognizes Councilman Dorsey.
Thank you, Mr. Council President. I neglected to put on the record here that just before this council meeting tonight, 2 vetoes were delivered to the council, and I would like to put on the record here that I was reminded by Councilwoman Clark of how long it's going to be before a scheduled meeting of the council is to occur, and that is too far out in the future for the council to even put a motion on the floor to override these vetoes. And I would like to put on the record that I believe the council should schedule another hearing before then, another meeting before then, in order to hold a vote on the override of these vetoes. Thank you, Mr. Council President.
Thank you. Chair recognizes Council Vice President Middleton.
Thank you, Mr. President. First, just want to do another shout out to all of the volunteers that continue to distribute food around the entire city, just from the agencies to volunteers to, I think you need to remember to call 211 if you are in need of any food or, any help with anything to get services right away. And on that note, the next meeting of the City Council will be held on Monday, June 15th, 2020 at 5 p.m. And then maybe have a moment of silence for the now 108 victims of homicide, the continued opioid epidemic, and also the continued deaths that we have from COVID-19. And as President, you had mentioned, continue to stay at home and wear your masks and be safe and healthy.
Thank you. There being no further business, this concludes the 84th meeting of the 72nd term of the Baltimore City Council.